For someone whose entire career has been focused on joy, why a podcast on pain? Because these stories need to be told. A good phoenix rising out of the ashes story reminds us all that not only can we survive, we can thrive. And when we emerge, we're different. That's the alchemy of pain. Welcome to another edition of the Alchemy of Pain podcast. In this series, I get to interview people who are doing powerful, amazing, purposeful things in the world. And usually, if you peel back that curtain a little bit or that onion, you can find that there was something that happened, how they survived, how they got through it, what they learned, how they coped, what therapy they did. These are the questions that we ask in order to bring you hope that if you're going through something similarly, you can get through it too. Now, my interview today is with a dear friend of mine, Stephanie Smith, and we were actually having lunch yesterday. And she's a published author, and was a successful municipal clerk, and now she is equally successful working with a prominent law firm, and she has so much influence. She's a speaker, and I had to stop in the middle of lunch and say, did anything bad ever happen to you? Because she's so joyful and so full of life that I had to wonder. And then she told me. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, Stephanie. So glad to have you here.
Oh, it's so good to be here, Brenda. I'm so glad that we had the conversation yesterday because it really made me stop and think about how grateful I am that my life has turned out the way it is. Just having that conversation with you it just brought me more joy. So it was awesome.
I feel the same way. And it was so fresh in my mind. And I was so delighted you said, yeah, let's do it and do it so quickly. And one of the things we talked about at lunch is we can't make assumptions about people. You can seem to have it all together, but that doesn't mean you never went through stuff. And
Right.
usually the people that shine the brightest are the ones that have gone through the stuff. But I gave a little preamble about what you do now, but why don't you tell our viewers how you serve in the world today?
Well, it's interesting. I spent my whole professional career, if you will, in public service, right? I was a municipal clerk. I was a government analyst. I was a management analyst for a police department, a management analyst for a fire department. I was a department head for multiple cities. And my whole professional career really revolved around the municipal services, living in your community and what does your city provide for you, right? So that's what I did for about 35 years. And a good portion of that was as a municipal clerk. And one of the duties of a municipal clerk is in California anyway, where I live, is to be the elections official. And in the election of 2020, I don't know if anybody wants to remember back that far, but it was a pretty stressful election. It was a pretty ugly national debate. And after the end of that election cycle, I just said, I've done this a really long time, and I think it's time to stop. And so I retired as a municipal clerk, and then I immediately went to work for a municipal law firm that serves cities, counties, special districts. And so instead of being on the side of the telephone where I'm calling my city attorney asking for help, now I'm on the side where I'm answering those questions for my fellow municipal clerk friends. And so it allowed me to do all the things I loved about my job, which was provide, that bridge between the government and the governed, help with democracy, help with elections, which is the core of our country's democracy. All that stuff that I love to do without any of the politics, right? I didn't have to deal with elected officials. I didn't have to deal with cranky citizens. I could just deal with people that wanted to talk to me with my help. So I started doing that. But also in 2020, I realized a lifelong dream of being a published author and wrote a book that did fairly well. It was a bestseller in a couple of different Amazon categories. And so I was super excited about that. I'm working on a second book. I continue to speak and to train municipal clerks. I go all around the country to different municipal clerk organizations at their conferences, and I train them, help them with their whatever leadership issues they might be having. Right? I like to talk about leadership issues. And then the last thing that I think is providing service to people is going in the final stages of launching my own podcast, Civic Impact. She leads the way, where I'm going to focus on women in government. I'm going to focus on the contributions that women are making to leading our communities, our counties, our states, our national government. And sometimes women get pushed aside a little bit, just a little bit. And so I like to help people step out of that shell, step out of those shadows, to, own their power and to just be the person they were created to be. Because when we're that person, then good things always fall.
I mean, you're the easiest interview ever, Stephanie. And you perfectly segued into me providing the context for all the pink, and she leads the way behind you. Tell them the name of your first book so that they can find it, because it's a really good one.
My first book is called Values-Based Goal Setting: How to live the life that to live the life, dream big and live the life that you were meant to live. That's the first book, and it really deals with the fact that when we set goals, the traditional SMART model, that works for widgets. It works for counting how many units a factory can make in a certain period of time. But let's face it, it doesn't work for the big goals, the goals of the heart. And if it did, we wouldn't be setting the same New Year's resolutions year after year after year after year, right? And so we wouldn't be making the same mistakes. We wouldn't be doing the same things, because we would be achieving all that we dream to achieve. But when we tie our goals to what we value, to what's important to us, then we're a lot more engaged, we're a lot more committed to seeing it through, right? And so that's what that book is about. It kind of takes the reader step by step, how to identify what matters to them, what really matters to them. And, okay, so let's say you want to lose 50 pounds. Why do you want to lose 50 pounds? Well, I want to look good. Well, that's kind of vain, not a bad, I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but if it's just because you want the vanity aspect of it, as soon as that chocolate cake comes out, you're going to be eating the chocolate cake, right? But if you want to lose 50 pounds because you want to get healthy, because you want to play with your grandchildren, and you want to be around, maybe you have a new love in your life and you want to be around a long time with this person, then then the goal has value. The goal has meaning. And so you're gonna stick with it and you're gonna achieve the goal. So that's just one example of that with values-based goal setting.
So the values-based goal setting is an excellent book, and we're going to put in the show notes links so people can find your stuff, and then also explaining the pink behind you.
Yeah. So being in government, which is a paramilitary organization, essentially. Government is run a lot like the military, and women have traditionally not been celebrated, honored, valued the way that. And I believe that we shouldn't have to act or dress like a man in order to get paid. And so pink is my color. I love pink. It doesn't show up so much on the video, but this is really kind of that's a fuchsia top and a fuchsia sweater. But I started a blog years and years ago that has kind of evolved into more of a wholesale repository for my business ventures, my books, and it's called The Pink Briefcase. And so, because again, I just don't think we need to wear the pantsuits all the time. We don't need to be, we don't need to uh, be neutral. We don't need to be beige. Be who you want to be. If it's Barbie pink, be Barbie pink. If you like wearing navy blue, wear navy blue. But again, we don't have to act or dress like a man in order to get paid like one. So I'm all about the pink.
And yesterday at lunch, my friend Stephanie had pink sunglasses, a pink shirt, sweater, pink flannel, pink backpack. She was on brand. Now,
Pink boots, pink
and
boots.
pink, yes. So you've already experienced her energy and her vivaciousness, the fact that she has a powerful voice and she has something to say. And so, as it usually is, the painful thing that happens is the very enemy of us living our purpose. And if you don't mind, because this is the big reveal, and this is what provoked me to say you need to come on the podcast because we haven't discussed this. What is the significant, painful experience that changed you forever?
So for the first 20 some odd years of my life, was experiencing what like psychologists call it the mother wound, right? Bottom line, my mom didn't like me. My mom had 5 children, and I'm the right, but I was born 10 months after my older toddler brother passed away unexpectedly. And my whole life, I was treated like a replacement child, right? She tried to replace my brother, got pregnant right away, had another baby. But a couple of things about that. Number one, you can never replace a child. Number two, I wasn't the boy she lost. And number three, I think she was afraid to bond with me as a baby because she had just lost this baby. And it was probably, I can imagine, very painful for her. And I haven't had this conversation with her because my mother is not warm and fuzzy. My mother is not a loving kind of person. She's very cold, very distant, and not just to me, but to pretty much everybody. And so we haven't had this conversation, but I can only imagine that a lot of that was going through her head, right? But she never really liked me. She never supported me. She never, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? She never encouraged me to do things beyond what she thought was the traditional role of a woman. I mean, my mom got married at 17. She was a farmer's daughter. She was a farmer's wife. And she did not see the value in doing anything other than getting married and having children. And I didn't buy into that. If you haven't gotten it by now, I'm kind of a talkative person. I have big ideas. I like to be busy. I like to do things. And I didn't want that for myself. And so it was hard being a teenager. It was hard growing up, but it got harder when she would say things to me like, well, gosh, if your brother hadn't died, you probably never would have been born. So am I supposed to be grateful that my brother died? Am I supposed to be happy about that? I mean, why would you say that to your child? You probably never would have been born. Like, I wish you hadn't been born. That's what your mind kind of goes to, right? And so there were conversations like that growing up. Then there were conversations about I found out when I was in my early 20s that when I was a teenager, she would purposely create situations where I was home alone with my high school boyfriend. Like she was wanting me to get pregnant as a teenager. So I would have to get married. And those kinds of things they're hard to accept about your own mom, right? That your mom has such a narrow view of your potential and future.
So I just want to sit here a minute because we also had discussed this yesterday. There was a commonality among women of a certain era where they didn't really bond with particularly their daughters. And this nurturing thing that I think we all long for as human beings, it just missed us, and you hope, you want, you believe that your mom is supposed to be in your corner, rooting for you. And when you don't have that, you called it the mother wound, psychology calls it, I called it blatant rejection by
Right.
my mother. I felt, and look, we both will say this, I'm sure, but she was a product of her upbringing. And I've had to work on the whole forgiveness thing, absolutely, but I'm going to call it what it was. I was rejected because I was 100 pounds in kindergarten. I was morbidly obese. I was an embarrassment. And I didn't fit the mold of somebody that would make her proud. And when I grew into this boisterous, wanting to talk, be out in public and get an education and grow person, I know she felt threatened by that. Now, she did put me through college, and I will be forever grateful for that. But when I was making that decision, I recall vividly her saying to me, "Are you really sure you know you could be a cocktail waitress?" As if that was the high watermark to shoot for. So, dealing with this rejection by your own mother and this wound, and I remember you telling me that a friend had said that she got a phone call from the mother got a phone call from your mother, which was a turning point. Something
It was.
snapped.
It was. So my best friend in high school, uh, thank God I met this girl in high school. We lived on different sides of town. So we hadn't known each other prior to going to the singular high school in town. And thank God I met her. Uh, because her mother was instrumental in healing a lot of the damage that my own mother had done. But her mother received a phone call from my mother wanting to know asking for help. What am I going to do with Stephanie? She won't listen. She won't listen to me when I tell her that she needs to get married. She doesn't need to go to college. She needs to get married. And some of it was that my own mom didn't think I was pretty enough or talented. I wasn't going to find a guy, so I had a guy that she liked, but he was a high school boyfriend. I knew he wasn't my soulmate. I knew that. He was a high school boyfriend. But my mother liked him, and she was so worried that there was never going to be another guy that would like me or love me because I was so unlovable. And so I needed to marry him. And and my mother's asking my friend's mom, what can I do? And what I don't know what my friend's mother told her, but I do know that my friend's mother saved my life because she stepped in and she taught me what it meant to be a loving mom. She was incredibly same age, same generation as my mother, but incredibly loving and nurturing. Nurturing is the word. I mean, almost to the point of smothering. Almost to the point of smothering. Her own children would admit that their mom kind of smothered them, but she taught me what it meant to be a mom and a loving mother, and that it wasn't me. I wasn't the problem. That it was perfectly wonderful to want to go to college. You mentioned your mom putting you through college. I wanted to get away from my family because I wanted to, a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to just see what it would be like on my own, away from an environment where I was constantly being told I wasn't good enough. But also, I wanted I wanted to go to the University of Notre Dame. It was my dream school. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write novels. I maybe teach high school. That's what I wanted to do. So I worked really hard and I had great grades and I applied and I got in. But I was young. I was only 17 when I graduated from high school. My mom and dad refused to sign any of the paperwork I needed. They refused to provide me with any of the money that they said they would share with me for college. And I didn't have anybody on my side there. I didn't really know to check with like the counselors. I didn't know about student loans. I didn't know about financial aid packages. And so I had to turn that acceptance down. I still have it in my heart that I was accepted to the University of Notre Dame, but I didn't get to go, right? And then my mom wouldn't pay for me to go to the local college. I went to work full time out of high school and I worked in a hospital emergency room. And I would work the graveyard shift at a full time job so that I could afford to go to school. So I worked graveyard, worked from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Then I'd get off and I'd drive to the university and I'd go to school from 8 a.m. to like 2 p.m. Then I'd go home and I'd go to bed. And then I'd get up and I'd do homework and I did that for 4 long years. And it was all because my mom didn't think I was good enough to go to college, and so it was hard. It was very hard.
I
It was just
wonder though, I wonder if she knew not only were you good enough, but your good enoughness was a threat to her. A threat to
probably
her way of approaching life. I mean, you were an anomaly. Where did you come from, Stephanie? I mean, the daughter of a farmer and a farmer's wife, and and then here you are wanting to write books and go to Notre Dame and, set the world on fire.
so it's so funny. I don't think our environment determines who we are created to be. I really don't. My my dad's my dad's mother was born in 1904. My grandmother on my dad's side, she was a farmer's wife, farmer's daughter, but she was a writer and she was an elementary school teacher in a one room school. And she, before she started having children, she taught elementary school in a like a one-room cabin schoolroom. And she wrote and she kept a journal that was beautiful. And reading her journal entries, I mean, I don't know if it's even legal for me to do that. I would love to publish that for her because it's so beautiful and heartfelt, right? The thing she would just capture her day. And she also was this incredibly loving person. I mean, she was in Missouri and I was in California, so we didn't visit a lot, but and she passed away when I was 10, but every time I went there, she made me feel like I was her only grandchild. And she had a lot of grandchildren. She made me feel like I was the most important person in her life and just was so loving and so kind. And and so she had the same upbringing in the same town that my mom did. But she was this and my mom was that. And I was this with same as my grandmother, right? I took after my grandmother. And I think that that's what bothered my mom the most, is that I wasn't in her mold. I wasn't what she envisioned for it. I was a little much. I talk all the time. I mean, memory of being in the fifth grade and they were going to change my classroom because of something shaking up in the school. And I didn't want them to change my classroom because I loved my teacher. And my mom was hanging laundry outside on a clothesline, even though we were in California, she still used a clothesline. And so she's hanging as opposed to washers and dryers that we use now. And so she's out in the backyard hanging laundry, and I'm out there crying to my mother about how I didn't want this. And I'm talking, 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 crying, 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 crying. And she says, "Will you just stop already? It's just a classroom. It's not the most important thing in the world." And to my little, what, 9, 10-year-old self, the classroom was the most important thing in my world because it was the one place that I felt safe. It was the one place that I felt like I mattered because I was a good student and the teachers respected me, for I was a teacher's pet kind of person because I was smart and anyway, I don't know. But it was the one place I felt really safe. And for her to say it wasn't the most important thing, it was hard. It was
I
hard.
remember when I used to cry because I was a very sensitive kid. So morbidly obese and very sensitive. That's a 1-2 punch. And I would cry a lot. Still do, by the way. And I remember my mom saying, "Stop crying. You'll upset me." And, it really was all about her. And I learned at a very young age to stuff my feelings in. It took lots of therapy and lots of really looking back at this child and giving the child permission to be who she really was. But again, we will say we're not here to blame our parents because they were doing the best they could with what they had. And I really feel for the fact that your mother had lost a child. What a horrible thing to go through emotionally. But perhaps she was exactly, and perhaps I feel my mom was exactly what I needed so that we could become who
Yes.
we are. Because, like an unsinkable cork, nothing was going to keep you down, Stephanie.
Exactly. And I know this to be a fact. You are spot on, Brenda, because I know this to be a fact because my older sister and my younger sister, whom my mother babied and coddled and loved and gave everything to and did everything, they both pretty much did nothing with their lives. And, they had everything that I wanted, and yet they did nothing with their lives. My younger sister was morbidly obese, and I'm talking 600 pounds as a 53-year-old woman, and she didn't survive COVID. She didn't survive COVID. And it was unfortunate, and I was very sad, and I felt awful that I couldn't have helped her more to, figure out how to get out of that cycle of being so obese. But she had gotten everything from my parents, everything. They reversed mortgaged their home to support her life in Missouri when she fled an abusive marriage. They were paying for everything and not asking for her to do anything in return. And yet and then when she got to the point where she was too sick to live on her own, she came, and my mom would say, "Well, I'm already paying for her life. I don't bring her home." She came home, but she did not survive COVID. And then my older sister is alive, and she's married and has two adult children. But she's worked in a low, in my opinion, low paying, dead end job, same job for over 30 years. Her and her husband have nothing to show for their efforts, are frankly just waiting until they're 67. She's 67, so she can retire on Social Security. And literally, that will be the only income she has because she's done nothing with her life. But yet, my mother gave her everything. And so you're spot on. It was exactly what I needed to to break out of the mold that my mother was creating and turn into the person that I believe I was created to be. I would not have the impact. I would not have the influence. I would not have the friends. I would not have the husband that I have. I would not have the children or the grandchildren that I have now had I followed the path that my mom wanted me to follow.
So you
And
could have been the obedient slash good girl,
correct.
but squelched your very essence. And you voted with you. And I want to know how you, because I know for many years, my main motive for success or to look a certain way or to become things or to get married was so I could finally win the approval, which was an exhausting pursuit. When did you finally wave the white flag and say, I'm no longer seeking that? It's just settling. I will never get my mother's approval. Like that took me way long time in my life.
Mhm. I think for me, it was a long time too. I was in my 40s. I was in my 40s. I went to a management retreat that a lot of government officials go to. It's no longer in business. And unfortunately, that's the case because it was an amazing transformational experience for me. But it was one of these things where you would go for a week to a retreat center and then you would go back the next year and you go back the next. It was like a 3-year program. And so I did 3-week-long sessions at this retreat center. And the speakers were all people that had an understanding of government, but were not government. But everybody that was there was government. And the idea was to reframe what it meant to be a government employee. That was the whole idea of this leadership program. And lead with the heart and lead with your spirit versus lead with bureaucracy. It was basically trying to unravel bureaucracy. And some of the people that I met there were the most new age thinkers or different thinkers, poets, writers. There was a Nebraska State Assembly person who would always come out to do this retreat as well. And these people, through various sessions and workshops with them, they basically told me, Stephanie, you're important just the way you are. You are never going to make your mom happy. You are never, ever going to make your mom happy. So stop making yourself unhappy trying to make your mom happy. And I thought about it over time with these people, these thought leaders, and I realized they were 175% right. And I just started leaning in, as Sheryl Sandberg would say, leaning in to who I was created to be. And instead of, okay, so you're the same way I am. We get excited about things and we start talking, and sometimes in government and when you're a woman, men can look at you and say, oh, you're too emotional. And then I would shrink and I'd get small and I'd say, oh gosh, they're right. I need to stop talking. I need to stop advocating for whatever I'm doing. I need to stop. I'm being a girl. And it was going through this leadership program at this retreat center that showed me that I was not being emotional. I was being passionate. And then the question becomes, this is a really big issue. I'm being passionate. The question is, why aren't you? Why don't you care about this? And when I reframed that in my mind, it changed who I was at work, who I was at City Hall. I was very fortunate that my husband, I don't even know how I met this guy. I mean, I know how I met him.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
You got to tell the story of how you met this guy because this is really good. And by the way, audience, I hope that you are, I mean, this alone, stop making yourself unhappy pursuing the goal to make your mother happy or fill in the blank, whomever that may be. It is elusive. Finding that home inside yourself, self-acceptance, self-worth, and then you're not a victim anymore because nobody's putting baby in a corner anymore.
No, no,
And
no.
you began living your life, but let's take this little brief detour. Happily married, what, almost 40 years?
38 years.
So, and you met serendipitously.
Okay, so we met in a dive bar. So, ladies, men, whoever's hearing me right now, don't let anybody tell you that you are not going to meet someone valuable in a bar. Because I truly believe that you will meet the person that you are destined to be with, no matter where you are. So, if you haven't found that person yet, hold out some hope, okay? And
Guess where I'm going right after this interview.
right? Okay. So I was 21 years old and still very much in this cycle of I'm not good enough, right? And my best friend in the whole wide world, we met when we were 10. So by then we were known each other 11 years. Just by the way, I had lunch with this woman today. We have now been friends for 50 years. 50 years. And so anyway, it was her birthday. She was 21. I had already turned 21. She was now 21. And she was hell bent on going buying a drink in a bar. And I'm like, her name's Diane. Well, Diane, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's like clubs aren't open. The restaurant bars really weren't happening back then. And I didn't want to go someplace scary. So she goes, no, I want to get a drink and I want to get a drink now because she had to go to work. She worked at the same hospital I did and she had to go to work. And it's like, So we drive around town and we find this country western bar and it's literally 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But it didn't look super scary. So we pull in and we go in and it's full of these construction workers that are stopping for a drink on their way home from work. Pretty normal, right? It happens. And she immediately pounds down 2 beers and a shot of whiskey and is feeling good. And I'm driving, so I'm not doing that. And she starts like dancing with these people on the dance floor. And I'm sitting at the bar by myself. And there's a man right next to me. And he asked me, we start talking. And he goes, so I say, what do you do? And he says, I'm an iron worker. And I said, oh, like rebar and reinforcing iron. And his eyes lit up because he had never met a woman who understood what rebar was, especially not a 21-year-old. Well, I worked for the city in the building department. I approved permits for rebar all the time. And so anyway, we just started talking and we've known her birthday is in December 29th. On December 29th of this year, we'll have been together for 40 years. And so, but it's interesting because we're both from the same type of family, right? His parents were still married, no divorces. My parents were still married, no divorces. The same faith traditions. We grew up in the same church, the same, type of same religion. And we were destined to meet each other. right? So the fact that it was a dive bar had nothing to do with it. That's the way I look at it. Anyway, so there's
I
another
thought I love the little side journey there, and I do love that you found a partner also who, unlike your mother, is rooting for you all the way. I mean, this is your sidekick. Stephanie gets asked to speak at international conferences. She leads Athenian dialogues. She is a brilliant speaker and trainer. And guess who's always carrying her bags, making sure she gets there on time, safely, making sure the room is set up, and it's her husband, because she did not let life shrink her. She didn't let the naysayers shrink her. She stood up and she was who she was, which was infectious, and it attracted to her all the things that she deserved. And so, for anybody out there who's feeling like, well, if they were on my side, or, I had a bad this, and, yeah, nobody gets a pass. We all go through challenges and we don't always get the perfect packaging, but we get what we need. Be who you are. Stand up and be who you are, your very essence, and your destiny will unfold for you.
it will.
Absolutely.
It will.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. I did not have I honestly, I did not have an easy path. I mean, and it's so funny because my sister, older sister, she still is just livid that I have this life because she felt like it should have been hers. It's like you had the same opportunities I did, sweetheart. You did. You had the same exact opportunities. You grew up in the same household. You had more because you had mom that paid for you to go to college.
So, if we are talking right to someone listening who's just, and we get it, it hurts. I cried many a tear thinking, how unlovable am I that my own mother doesn't adore me? Now, there are those that would say, oh, she loved you. She loved you the best she could. But I don't think she liked me all that much. And you can feel that, you know? So, what would you say to someone who is dealing with that pain? Tell it to them, Stephanie.
Well, you have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge that it hurts. You have to, you can't just say, oh, it doesn't matter, because that's going to come back in other areas of your life if you just stuff it down and say it doesn't matter. I did that for many, many years, and it manifested itself in other physical ways. I mean, I had some health challenges in my early 30s that I believe were a direct result of not taking care of myself and stuffing the pain inside, right? So you gotta let it out. You've got to let it go. Quote Elsa and Anna from Frozen, you got to let it go. Um, but how do you do that, right? It's like, it's hard. I can't let it go because, you've lived with this. You might have lived with this pain for a really, really long time. And it almost becomes your friend or your security blanket, right? Gives you a place to retreat to, gives you a place to blame, gives you a place to excuse your behavior because you've got this terrible thing that may have happened to you. But if you are not living the life that you were created to live, and I believe as long as you have breath in your body, you have a mission, you have a purpose, you have something good to accomplish and to be proud of, as long as there is breath in your body. And if you are not taking steps towards that, then you're cheating yourself and you're cheating the world. You're cheating other people out of whatever gifts you have that you're not letting out. And so it's hard to say no to a parent or a person, that has, it's hard to give up trying to please them, but you never will. You never will. You're never going to please them. You just trust me, trust Brenda. You are never going to make those people happy. But here's the thing, you are not a tree, you are not planted in the ground. You can move, you can change your scenery, you can leave, you can do things. There are three solutions to any problem. This is my answer to everything. There are three solutions to any problem. You can accept it. Well, oh, I can't accept that. No, that's terrible. I'm not going to accept that. Okay, fine. Well, you can change it. You can accept it or you can change it. Well, I can't change it. I don't have the power to change it. Well, okay, fine. Well, then if you're not going to accept it and you're not going to change it, well, then you can leave it. Well, I can't leave it. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? You know what we call people that won't accept, leave, or change? We call them martyrs. You are choosing to be in pain. If you will not accept, leave, or change the situation that is causing you the pain, then you are choosing the pain. I got
But
tired of choosing pain. And so I accepted it. I accepted it, really, truly. I'm not going to write my mother off. I'm not going to, cut her out of my life. She never did anything horrible to me, physically or any of that. You know, I'm not going to cut her out of my life, but I just accepted that I'm not going to be the person she wants. And I started living my life the way I wanted to live it. My husband was right there with me. He supported me. He puts up with me you know, changing my thoughts like I change my underwear, I was like, oh, I got a new idea, which might be different than the new idea I had last week, those kinds of things. And I just decided I was done being the martyr and I'm just going to accept the pain and I'm going to let it go.
what you just gave us was so rich that if people just get that definition of a martyr, this is well worth the time that we spent together here. And you are bound. The word that keeps coming to mind, two words actually, free and boundless. You have an effervescence that is a result of the decisions that you've made. And that's why I love being your friend. And I also feel compelled to say this. So I had to settle my mom issues. And the next step was having compassion for her because I don't know all of her stories and she's gone now. I don't know what made her the way she was. And it's really not my place to judge her. And even though I never felt like I got all the love, boy, I did love her. And I longed for her love. And someday I think it will all make sense. But in the meantime, your advice is so well taken. You cannot live to make other people happy with you. Some people aren't happy unless they're miserable. And so you
Right.
can spend your whole life trying to make them happy instead of spending your life living your purpose. Any final words for the audience, Stephanie?
Yeah, I think your point about your mom being gone is so well taken. You're never going to know the answers, right? In this lifetime, you're not going to know the answers. And for me, I had the same situation. My mom's not gone, but she has dementia. She doesn't even remember my childhood. She doesn't. And funny twist of fate, who's her primary caregiver? That would be me. And so, and that's okay because I feel like she did. Like, part of me feels like she did the best she could with what she had at the time. Was it happy? Was it pleasant for me? No, it wasn't. But I got through it because I didn't give in to who I was meant to be. Right. So, but I'm never going to know the answers either. I'm never going to know the answers in this lifetime because she doesn't even remember where we grew up. She thinks she lives in Missouri. Sometimes she thinks I'm her sister. Sometimes, she thinks I'm her daughter. Sometimes she thinks I'm her granddaughter. So, um, you it just goes to say that you can't wait. You just can't wait because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, right? So if you don't want to have the painful conversations with the people that are causing you the pain, that's fine. Then accept it, right? Accept the pain and let it go. And be who you want to be. because there are people that will love you and honor you and champion you if you are authentic about who you are. And so that's kind of my thing is like you don't need to answer to anybody. I mean, I used to joke about, well, if I don't sleep with you and you don't pay my bills, I don't care what you think. But I do care. And then it's still that way. You know, when people tell me, oh, you can't do that, it's like, you know what? I don't sleep with you and you don't pay my bills. So who cares? But even with my husband, even with even my husband, I'm still gonna kind of do my own thing. I'm gonna be who I want to be. There's a heck of a lot of pink in our house, and he is a big guy. I mean, picture the guys that walk on the I-beams, right? Picture the guys that build the 50-story skyscrapers and build the bridges over San Francisco Bay. That's what he did for a living. And he's a big guy. And there's a heck of a lot of pink in my house, and he's okay with it. He's okay with it. So
Because he loves you. He loves you.
The right situation for you, the right purpose for you, the right job, the right idea, the right everything will show up if you are true to.
And so with that, I know that people in the audience are going to want to contact you or work with you, ask you to speak. How can people get a hold of you?
Email's really good. My email is Stephanie D, like it's there on my Zoom, Stephanie D at thepinkbriefcase.com.
Thepinkbriefcase.com. I love it. Stephanie, it was a joy. This was definitely a divine appointment, and I'm so glad that we've recorded this. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in. I know that you got encouraged today. If you're going through a dark time, and if you're feeling rejected or wounded by those that you love, even, keep pressing against that chrysalis. Because just like Stephanie created strength in her wings, look at how she is flying. And so will you. Have a good day, everybody.